Welcome back. This is English 201B, English 212B. I'm Professor Patchell, American Literature, 1865 to the present. And today I'm going to give a little micro lecture on Ernest Hemingway's Soldier's Home, a story that seems very straightforward, but that really is deceptive in a lot of ways about the themes and the ideas that it examines. I think that it goes into the great tradition of American veterans literature, and serious American veteran literature, stuff that gets canonized, ends up places like the Norton Anthology, read in college classes, studied, is literature that is often critical of war. The best war literature really is anti-war literature, I would say. I want to read you something from the Finca Vigia authoritative collection of Hemingway's short stories. It's a fragment that often is anthologized with this story, preceding the story, in other words, coming before the story when it's presented in a work. And I'm really kind of not sure why Norton leaves it out, because Norton is usually considered the most authoritative source. But listen and see if this changes your reading of the story. This fragment is often included at the beginning of the story. While the bombardment was knocking the trench to pieces at Fasalta, he lay very flat and sweated and prayed, "Oh, Jesus Christ, get me out of here. Dear Jesus, please get me out. Christ, please, 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 Christ. If you'll only keep me from getting killed, I'll do anything you say. I believe in you, and I'll tell everyone in the world that you are the only one that matters. Please, dear Jesus." The shelling moved further up the line. We went to work on the trench, and in the morning the sun came up, and the day was hot and muggy and cheerful and quiet. The next night, back at Mestra, he did not tell the girl he went upstairs with at the Villa Rosa about Jesus, and he never told anyone. So we can imagine maybe that's Krebs, and he's in an arterial bombardment. He's in danger of being killed. He's crying out to Jesus Christ and saying he'll do anything. He'll basically be an evangelist, right? It's an intense moment. But later, he's going with what appears to be a prostitute upstairs, and he doesn't ever talk or think about Jesus again. I think this really changes the story a lot. The story that we get in Norton and the story that we get to study and talk about. I'm going to just go over a few thoughts on this story and try to nail it down. Not quite, but give you some things to think about. Okay, the story is told in third person, subjective point of view, which means we get Krebs's perspective and his thoughts, but he is not telling the story. It's easy to confuse this type of narration with first-person narration, but Krebs is not our narrator. Our narrator is sort of like this voice in Krebs' head. So this does affect meaning in a way, because really we're just kind of getting this voice guiding us through this thing. The frame and structure of the story, I want to talk about the prose a little bit. In other words, the actual writing, Hemingway's writing style. It's very journalistic, and there's a little bit of intertextuality in this story as well. Intertextuality is references to other texts within a text. It could be art, it could be, but in literature, we're mostly concerned about literary texts. So the intertextual reference here is when Krebs is sitting at the breakfast table with his mom. He's reading the Kansas City Star, which is the newspaper that Hemingway got his start writing for. And in fact, I recently attended a lecture, and the person who he was an expert on, Hunter S. Thompson, he was saying that so many so many American writers took their inspiration and their structure and their style from Hemingway's style, and Hemingway's style came from the Kansas City Star's style manual. They actually had a style manual. So we get this sort of journalistic, it's almost like reporting this story. It's a very different type of writing, right? It's minimalistic. It leaves things out. It leaves things up to us to figure out. We don't get a lot of explanation. We don't know exactly why Krebs is in the state of mind that he's in. Um, how about I want to focus just for a second on a conversation with his sister who comes in. And I bring up his sister because you can contrast her as a character. And he has two sisters, but she says this is his best sister. You can contrast her with the girls that Krebs watches, with his mother, with his father, who notice we never actually see or get any dialogue from in the story. He is mentioned. In fact, one of the last things is Krebs saying, he's going to not go visit his father at the office. He's going to miss that one, meaning, he's not going to do what his mom says. She wants him to go by the office and visit father and talk about borrowing the car and getting his life together. And Krebs is sort of like, no, I don't want to do that, really. I really, I'm going to miss that one. Um, Krebs suffers from a type of alienation. He's seen extreme horror in World War I. We get the feeling of. The text, and this is where I take a little umbrage with the text, because it says that he joined the Marines, but he keeps talking about, he had learned that in the Army. You don't need a girl. He learned that in the Army. You don't need this. He learned that in the Army. And maybe back in those days, there was not a big distinction, but it does tell some of the places that Krebs fought, and one of those places was Belleau Woods. And if you know anything about military history, Belleau Woods is where the Marine Corps, in a horrific battle, defeated the German army. And legend has it that this is where the term devil dog comes from, which is kind of fitting for the story, even though it's not in the story. The term devil dog, Teufelhunden, was the term the Germans used for the U.S. Marines because they were like dogs from hell. They fought so ferociously, right? And I think that there is a little bit of the diabolical in this story as well. So let's get to some of that. Krebs suffers from alienation. He's probably suffering from PTSD as well, post-traumatic stress disorder. But alienation is kind of like this separation from society, from community. It's a feeling of being apart, of being alone, really. And Krebs is suffering from this very much so. And alienation goes hand in hand with modernism. It's a trait of modernism, alienation, because the world is changing. The world is getting bigger. The individual is shrinking. And remember, the American realists were trying to capture observations. They were trying to sort of capture reality. With modernism, we get a drift into subjectivity. We get a drift away from hard truth. And we see this with Krebs when he tries to tell his war stories in the pool hall or to other people, and they're not interested. So he says he has to lie, and he hates lying, and he's starting to notice that there's lies all around, and the only way he can get by in life is by lying, by deceiving, essentially, except for when he's around other soldiers. And then he poses and says, oh, yes, I was scared all the time. It was terrible, frightening. And the term pose is used a couple of times in here. And this word actually has its roots in French. We actually, if you've heard the term poser, that's exactly what this is talking about. People are posers, right? They're pretending. They're putting on an act. And Krebs has to do this to get by, just like people in the military said. They posed when they said, I don't need a woman. I don't need any of that stuff. I've got everything I need. So Krebs is suffering from alienation. He's drifting into deceit and lies. And we got to ask. I mean, typically we talk about protagonists in a story, and we got to ask, what does Krebs want? Typically, the protagonist is trying to reach some goal, and there's all sorts of obstacles stopping them from reaching that goal. And I would say that Krebs, all we can get from the story is that he wants things to go smoothly. He wants an uncomplicated life, and he's not going to get that here in Oklahoma, in his small American town. with middle class people. Charlie Simmons is getting a job. He's going to get married. He's going to contribute to the community. And that's very important because Krebs is alienated. He can't contribute to the community. He doesn't want to contribute to the community. He doesn't seem to want anything. And his position becomes actually sort of a satanic position. And I don't use that in the terms of, this person with a pitchfork and horns and, this kind of thing. I'm talking about rejection of community, rejection. He eventually rejects his family, except for that sister. And he rejects his mother in a lot of ways. I mean, he placates her and tells her, no, I was just angry about something. I was upset. I didn't mean it. But notice he never says he loves her. He can't pray. He says he won't pray. He says he's not in the kingdom of God. He's just sort of this drifting entity of subjectivity and distance. And when he rejects all these things, he becomes further alienated. I just want to say a couple of things about that sister again, return to the sister, and then I'll close out. He seems to actually be authentic with the sister. And I think it's sort of like she's authentic with him. And she's authentic with him in that she'll kid around with him. She'll kind of mock him a little bit, like, you old sleepyhead. She calls him Hare, which is interesting because a hare, obviously it's short for Harold, which is his first name, but a hare is also, we know, a rabbit, right? And rabbits are scared, they run. She calls him this twice, a hare. And we can't read too much into that, but I think it's interesting to think about that Krebs is suffering from a real fear. And it's like he's lost his place in the world. Even though he's a decorated veteran, he has opportunities, he has a supportive family, he can't seem to find himself or his place in the world. And it ends with him saying he's going to go watch his sister play indoor baseball. And I think that he still can relate to her because she'll make fun of him and she'll have this strange banter with him. And she's the only one in the story that he says, yes, I love you. And it gets a little weird. It gets a little, are you my beau? Which really means boyfriend, And he says, yes, of course. And she says, you love me? And he says, yes, I love you. She says, will you come watch me play baseball? And he's sort of like, maybe. She's all, oh, if you loved me, you'd come and watch me play baseball. So they have this sort of cute repartee. And it's really, in some ways, the only place that we see Krebs interacting with someone on almost a real level. I mean, the stuff about, being boyfriend and girlfriend with your sister may seem a little strange to us, but really, I think that what people don't get, especially about military service, is that the kidding around, the joking, the extreme comments, things that we would say, whoa, that's like really weird. You're saying you're in love with your sister, that this is kind of an essential part of military life. And I would argue that it's an essential part of life in general. Being comfortable enough with somebody to where you can joke around, you can throw out preposterous scenarios, you can make fun of each other is an essential part of life. And it seems like the rest of society presents themselves as being honest on the surface, but really they're more interested in lies. They're more interested in falsehoods. And that is the only place that Krebs can find himself. Now, maybe we get a little glimmer of hope after Krebs rejects the kingdom of God and his mother's love and all these things. He does say that he'll probably go by and watch his sister, play indoor baseball and then get a job in Kansas City, and that'll make everybody happy. But notice he also says he's not going to go see his father. And rejection of the father figure goes right hand in hand with rejection of God, I would say. And so that's where we leave Krebs, severely alienated, possibly suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is the world that that we get with Harold Krebs. Thank you.